Black CEO denied a room in her own hotel. Instantly, she reveals who really runs it. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. We don't accept blacks, you need to leave. The words landed like a gavel in the golden-lit lobby. A chandelier sparkled overhead, scattering light across polished marble, but no shine could blunt the sting. Guests froze mid-step, heads turned. That sentence didn't just echo, it split the room in two. Behind the reception desk, two women in navy uniforms stood like sentries. One, her arms folded tight, delivered the insult with the precision of someone who'd practiced it before. The other stayed silent, eyes flicking to the side, but silence can be its own verdict. And facing them stood a woman in a denim jacket and a navy cap, her presence unassuming, her voice steady even in silence. She looked like any traveler passing through. But her name, unknown to everyone in that lobby, already carried weight in boardrooms from New York to Singapore. She wasn't a scam. She wasn't a stranger. She was the black CEO who built this empire, and she had just been told she didn't belong in her own hotel. The receptionist didn't whisper. She projected, loud enough for the suited guard near the glass doors to shift his stance, loud enough for the couple waiting by the lounge chairs to stiffen, loud enough for the words to stain the marble like graffiti. The CEO didn't flinch. Her hand rested lightly on the counter. A black card gleamed beside her ID, as if daring them to verify it. But the woman behind the desk didn't touch it. She only crossed her arms tighter. "You need to leave," she repeated louder. The air changed. The lobby wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged, tense, the kind of stillness right before a thunderstorm. Somewhere near the velvet chairs, a man reached for his phone, thumb hovering over record. A guest whispered, "Did she really just say that?" The CEO finally spoke, her voice low and measured. "Run my name." But calm rarely satisfies those drunk on false authority. The receptionist smirked, leaning forward. "Your kind always tries this. Fake bookings, fake cards. Not today." Her colleague shifted, uneasy but mute. The guard by the door straightened, waiting for a signal. And in that pause, the CEO let the weight of the moment press against her, not because it broke her, but because she had carried it before. At 16 in Charlotte, a clerk told her a hotel lobby wasn't for her. At 24 in Atlanta, she watched a man laugh at the card she handed over. At 30, she drafted her company's zero-tolerance policy against guest profiling. And now, in the lobby she owned, history dared to repeat itself. She inhaled once. Slow, controlled. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was warning. And before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her, back to the woman they just tried to erase. Because in the next few minutes, the balance of power in this lobby will flip. And the very people who mocked her presence will be begging for their future. Just 10 minutes earlier, before the insult cracked the air, she had walked through the revolving glass doors of the Horizon Grand, alone. No entourage, no assistant trailing behind her, no luxury suitcase stamped with designer logos. Only a worn denim jacket, dark jeans, sneakers clean but ordinary, and a navy cap that shadowed her face from the chandelier's glow. Guests barely noticed her arrival. That was the point. She carried herself like someone who had learned to measure every step. Her phone was tucked in her pocket, her ID and card in hand, and nothing about her presence screamed power. That morning she had chosen deliberately. Leave the diamond watch in its case, trade the tailored blazer for denim, and silence every signal that might reveal her status. Because today wasn't just another check-in, it was a test. For months she had received whispers, emails, forwarded complaints, even anonymous staff notes about how certain employees handled guests who didn't look the part. She didn't want to read reports. She wanted to see it, feel it, prove it, and so she came herself. The Horizon Grand lobby was built to impress. Marble imported from Italy, gold trim around every column, a chandelier the size of a car dangling above the front desk. But wealth is not just marble and glass, it's how people are treated inside it. That's what she was here to measure. At the desk, she spoke calmly. Reservation for Carter, penthouse suite. The name alone should have shifted the ground beneath them. It should have triggered recognition because Carter wasn't just a guest name in their system. It was etched on the deed that sat in corporate files 3 blocks away. But the woman behind the counter didn't blink. She looked up and down, dismissive, like scanning a problem she wanted to disappear. That's a very high-tier room, the receptionist said flatly. Are you sure you booked the right hotel? Her words weren't questions, they were verdicts. The CEO didn't answer immediately. She simply slid her ID and black credit card across the counter, steady and precise, as though handing over evidence in a trial. The receptionist picked them up with 2 fingers, holding the card like it might stain her. Strange, she muttered, loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. This looks suspicious. Her colleague smirked, pressing a hidden button beneath the desk. Somewhere across the lobby, the suited guard stirred, shifting his weight toward them. The CEO's eyes didn't move. She had been here before, not in this building, but in this posture, invisible, doubted, erased before she could speak. But today she wasn't a bystander in someone else's narrative. Today she was the author. She kept her tone even. Check the system. The receptionist shook her head as if the effort was beneath her. Security will handle this. The line had been drawn, and for everyone in that lobby, from the guests whispering by the lounge chairs to the young concierge frozen at her podium, the test had begun. The black card still rested on the counter, untouched. The receptionist leaned closer, lips curling as if she'd already made her decision. This card looks fake, she said, loud enough for the lobby to hear. People try this all the time. Flashy plastic, fake names, hoping we don't check. Her colleague chuckled softly, a sound meant to sting. She reached for the phone on the desk and pressed 2 buttons with deliberate slowness. The red light blinked once. Across the lobby, the security guard straightened, adjusting the cuff of his navy blazer as he began his slow approach. The CEO remained perfectly still. Only her eyes moved steady, sharp, watching the stage assemble around her. Guests nearby shifted uneasily. A man in a tailored suit whispered to his partner, "That's not how you talk to a guest." But the receptionist didn't falter. She tilted her head, savoring the moment. "Where did you even get this?" she sneered, holding the card between 2 fingers like a counterfeit bill. "Off the street? Online? I've seen better fakes on Instagram." Her colleague smirked, crossing her arms. Maybe she thought the cap would help her blend in. The insult wasn't subtle anymore. It was performance. Each word louder than the last, thrown into the air so it could land on the ears of anyone within range. And it did. A mother with her teenage daughter by the elevator turned her head sharply. A young traveler by the concierge desk muttered, "This doesn't feel right." The CEO's silence only seemed to fuel them. The first receptionist tapped the card against the marble counter, each click like a drum beat. "This isn't your place. You don't belong in a penthouse suite. You barely belong in this lobby." From the corner, the concierge, young, hesitant, shifted in her seat. Her eyes darted from the CEO to the receptionist, then to the guests who were now openly watching. She didn't speak, but her body betrayed her, jaw tight, hands gripping the edge of her desk. The guard was halfway across the lobby now. His shoes echoed on marble, each step amplifying the tension. And still, the CEO didn't flinch. She had seen this before. At 26, when a loan officer called her high risk despite triple collateral. At 32, when a landlord refused to show her an office space until she proved her income. Now, 2 decades later, the same posture, the same tone, the same arrogance had returned in the very hotel that bore her name on its deed. "Security will take it from here," the receptionist declared, sliding the card behind the desk as though she had just confiscated contraband. The air shifted again. A ripple of whispers cut through the lobby. Phones tilted. One guest lifted her camera high enough to frame the counter. Another mouthed, "Record this." And in that moment, the CEO finally moved. Not frantic, not loud, just deliberate. She placed her hand flat on the marble and spoke, her voice steady enough to steady the entire room. "Check the system." The receptionist scoffed. "We don't have to." But her voice was thinner now, strained under the weight of the growing audience. Because what had started as a simple dismissal was no longer private. It was becoming a spectacle, and in the Horizon Grand lobby, the balance of power was beginning to tilt. The guard reached the desk, his shadow stretching across the marble like a verdict waiting to fall. His hand rested near his belt, posture heavy with authority. But before he could speak, the CEO lifted her gaze, calm, unwavering, and the entire lobby seemed to pause with her. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't even touch the card they had just seized. She simply let silence settle, sharp and deliberate. The receptionist mistook it for weakness. "See," she said, her voice rising with false confidence. "Nothing to say. That's because you don't belong here." The colleague beside her chuckled under her breath. The guard crossed his arms, ready to escort her out at the slightest nod. And yet, the CEO didn't flinch. She breathed once, slow and steady, like someone watching storm clouds gather but refusing to run for cover. A guest near the velvet chairs leaned forward in his seat. "She's not even fighting back," he whispered. Another replied, "Or maybe she doesn't need to." The young concierge at the side podium pressed her lips tight. She had seen plenty of difficult guests, but nothing about this woman screamed fraud. Her stillness unsettled her more than any shouting ever could. The receptionist, eager to fill the silence, tapped the black card against the counter. Each tap echoed like a hammer in a courtroom. "Fraud, trespass, that's all this is. 2A. But her words fell into the CEO's stillness like pebbles into deep water ripples on the surface, never touching the core. Because this wasn't her first trial. At 23, she sat across from a banker who refused her signature on a $1 million deal, insisting she bring a man to co-sign. At 28, she was told by a hotel clerk in Los Angeles, "You don't look like someone who belongs in a penthouse." She remembered the sting, the humiliation, but more than that, she remembered the vow she made. One day, she would own the very lobbies that tried to erase her. And now she did. The guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'll need you to step aside." She didn't move. She didn't even blink. Instead, her hand slid across the marble and closed gently around the edge of the counter, anchoring herself, not against fear, but against injustice. Her voice finally cut through the tension. Low, even, sharp. "This is your chance to correct yourself." The words were quiet, almost soft, but they carried. Guests near the elevators turned. The concierge's breath caught. Even the guard hesitated, his eyes narrowing as if he wasn't sure anymore. The receptionist laughed nervously. "You think you can intimidate us with words?" The CEO met her gaze. "No, with truth." The line cracked through the lobby like glass under pressure. For the first time, the receptionist's smirk faltered. And in that fragile silence, every guest watching could feel it. The storm wasn't in her voice. It was in her restraint. The lobby had grown too still, the kind of stillness that amplifies every sound. The faint hum of the chandelier, the squeak of polished shoes across marble, the impatient clicks of the receptionist's nails on the counter, all of it stretched like a drum roll. Then came the first witness. A young man in his 20s, backpack slung over one shoulder, slid his phone out of his pocket. He wasn't subtle. He raised it chest high, the red recording light glowing like a beacon. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered, loud enough for the people around him to hear. His camera lens caught the receptionist's folded arms, the guard's looming presence, and the woman in denim who hadn't raised her voice once. The receptionist's eyes flicked to the phone. "Put that away," she snapped. But the man didn't lower it. He angled it higher. "People should see this." A ripple moved through the room. Guests whispered, shifting in their seats, pulling out their own phones. A mother with her teenage daughter tapped record. A couple by the lounge chairs glanced at each other before opening TikTok. It wasn't just a dispute anymore. It was becoming evidence. At the concierge podium, the youngest employee in the room froze. Her name tag read Elena. She had only been with the hotel 6 months. She knew the rules, never contradict management, never interfere, but she also knew what she saw. A valid ID, a black card, a calm guest treated like a criminal. Her jaw tightened, her hands gripping the desk until her knuckles blanched. The guard noticed the phones, too. He shifted uneasily, the confidence in his posture cracking just enough to reveal doubt. "Ma'am," he said again, softer this time. "You need to step aside." "Wha?" But his words collided with the glow of half a dozen recording lights. He knew every move he made now would be captured, replayed, judged. The CEO remained still, her silence deliberate. She didn't encourage the cameras. She didn't stop them either. She let the moment speak for itself. From the far corner, a woman in a red scarf stood, voice trembling but firm. She showed you ID. She showed you her card. Why are you treating her like this? The receptionist's smirk returned, brittle but defiant. Because people like her don't book penthouse suites. The words landed heavy. A gasp rippled across the lobby. The teenager by the elevator whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Her mother's lips tightened. The phone stayed raised. And at her podium, Elena finally moved, just one step forward, not enough to challenge, but enough to mark the line she was no longer willing to ignore. Her eyes met the CEO's quiet recognition, unspoken solidarity. The receptionist didn't notice. She was too busy enjoying the illusion of control. But the tide was shifting, slowly, subtly. With every recording light, every whisper, every step of conscience from the staff who still believed in dignity. The CEO hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. The witnesses had begun to speak for her. The lobby was no longer neutral ground. Phones glowed like tiny spotlights, framing the scene from every angle. Whispers rose and fell in waves, but behind the desk, the receptionist only grew bolder, mistaking the crowd's silence for surrender. She straightened her blazer, lifted the card high, and announced for all to hear, "This is fraud. Her reservation is canceled." The words cracked like a whip. Guests flinched. Elena froze mid-step. The guard blinked, unsure. "Canceled?" one of the guests echoed. "She just showed you proof." "Boo." The receptionist didn't falter. She tossed the card to her colleague, who slipped it behind the counter with exaggerated care, like locking away contraband. "We don't tolerate scams," she said. "And we don't waste rooms on people who don't belong here." Her voice was louder now, every syllable designed to humiliate, not just dismiss. She wanted the entire lobby to hear. The CEO's eyes followed the card's disappearance into the drawer. Her jaw didn't tighten. Her breath didn't quicken. She simply stood there, still as stone. Her silence unsettled the second receptionist. Nervous, she blurted out, "Security, escort her out." The guard hesitated. His gaze flicked to the glowing phones, then back to the woman who hadn't once raised her voice. Something in his gut told him this wasn't what it seemed. The young traveler filming whispered into his mic, "They just took her card. That's theft." The receptionist snapped toward him. "Stop recording or leave the lobby." "Ho." But the damage was done. More phones lifted. A dozen lenses now hovered, all aimed at the counter. Elena's voice trembled as she finally spoke up. "Her name is in the system. I saw it this morning." The lead receptionist spun on her, eyes sharp. "Not another word, Elena, unless you want to pack your things tonight." Elena's lips pressed shut, but her eyes blazed. She had spoken enough for the guests to hear. The CEO finally moved, her hand resting flat on the marble again, her presence like an anchor in the storm. She spoke so softly that the words carried more weight than a shout. "You've made a mistake." The receptionist leaned in, smirking as though victory was certain. "No, you made the mistake walking in here." Gasps stirred among the crowd. The mother with her daughter whispered, "This is beyond unacceptable." The guard shifted again, his confidence cracking further. The receptionist ignored it. She slammed the drawer shut with a finality meant to seal the verdict. "Your reservation is void. Your presence is not welcome. Leave this lobby before we call the police." The room erupted in murmurs. Some guests shook their heads, others muttered outrage, and phones captured every second. But the CEO didn't move. Her silence was still the loudest sound in the room. The drawer shut with a metallic thud, echoing through the marble lobby like a prison door locking. Her card was gone, trapped behind steel. The receptionist's smirk widened as if she had just delivered justice, not theft. "Your account will be reported for fraud," she announced, loud enough to carry across the lounge. "You're finished here." A hush swept through the crowd. Guests shifted uncomfortably, but none of them looked away. Every lens caught the moment. The cruelty crystallized. The CEO remained still. Only her eyes moved, following the receptionist's hands as she scribbled something onto a form. Then the second receptionist chimed in, her voice shrill with false authority. "This is your last warning. Leave now or we'll have you removed." The guard stiffened, waiting. He glanced at Elena, then at the guests filming, then back at the denim-clad woman who hadn't so much as raised her voice. He looked like a man caught between duty and conscience. The receptionist slammed the form down on the counter. "Security! Escort her out!" Phones shifted instantly, recording every angle. Gasps rose, followed by a man's voice from the crowd. "You're throwing her out? After stealing her card?" The receptionist ignored him. She leaned forward, her words venom now, whispered but sharp enough for everyone to hear. "We can call the police right now. Imagine the headlines when they see you dragged out." The cruelty wasn't hidden anymore. It was weaponized. The CEO's breath remained even. Her hand stayed anchored to the counter, fingers relaxed. But her silence now carried the weight of a blade waiting to strike. She had been here before. At 19, when a department store guard accused her of shoplifting and searched her bag in front of strangers. At 28, when a hotel clerk told her, "Wait outside until a manager arrives," even though she had already paid for her suite. Each time, humiliation carved itself into her bones. But humiliation never made her smaller. It sharpened her. And now, here she was, sharper than ever. Elena finally broke. "You can't take her property. That's against policy." The lead receptionist turned on her. "One more word, and you're gone." Elena's jaw trembled, but she didn't back down. "Then fire me, but this is wrong." Her defiance sparked murmurs among the guests. A man in a navy suit muttered into his phone, "I'm live right now. This hotel is discriminating in broad daylight." The receptionist's face flushed red, but she doubled down. "Call the cops," she hissed at the guard. The guard froze, eyes darting between the crowd of witnesses and the woman standing motionless in denim. His radio crackled softly at his side, but he didn't move. The CEO's voice finally broke the silence. Low, steady, every syllable like a verdict. "Be careful. The choice you make right now will follow you for the rest of your life." The room went still again, phones tilted forward, every witness leaned in. But the receptionist only laughed, brittle and forced. "No, the only thing that follows you tonight will be a police record." And with those words, she sealed her fate. The guard's radio crackled again, a faint reminder that one word from the receptionist could summon backup. But before he could reach for it, the woman in denim lifted her phone from her jacket pocket. Her movement was unhurried, precise. She tapped the screen once, brought it to her ear, and spoke with a calmness that cut sharper than any shout. "Nia, log everything. Timestamp this moment." On the other end, a voice responded instantly clear, efficient, waiting. "Already recording. Do you want escalation?" The receptionist scoffed. "Who are you calling? Your boyfriend? That won't save you." "Star." The CEO ignored her. Her eyes stayed fixed on the marble counter, as if engraving the details into stone. "Escalation protocol. Level 2. A silence followed on the line, then the voice again. "Confirmed. System standing by." The words weren't meant for the receptionist, but they carried across the lobby. Guests exchanged confused glances. The guard frowned. Elena's breath caught in her chest. Something about the tone, the precision, didn't sound like a guest bluffing. The receptionist laughed, brittle. "Protocol? What protocol? You're nothing but a trespasser." The CEO's gaze finally lifted, steady and direct. "You just stole corporate property. That's logged. That's permanent." Phones tilted closer. The man in the navy suit whispered into his live stream. "She said corporate. Did you hear that?" The receptionist leaned across the counter, her smirk faltering. "You think a phone call scares me?" The CEO didn't blink. "No, but it should scare you." "Yodi-do." Her words landed heavy, not because they were loud, but because they were undeniable. Even the guard shifted, his jaw tightening as if suddenly aware that he might be standing on the wrong side of the story. Elena took another step forward. "She's not bluffing," she said softly, almost to herself but loud enough to be heard. "I've seen that card code before. It's owner level." The receptionist snapped her head toward her. "Shut up, Elena." But the damage was done. Gasps fluttered through the guests. The mother with her teenage daughter whispered, "Owner level? Did she just say owner?" The CEO pressed her palm flat on the counter, anchoring herself once more. Her phone still at her ear, she spoke clearly. "Nia, prepare internal audit. Freeze access logs from this moment forward." "Confirmed," the voice replied. "Audit initiated." The receptionist's face drained of color. She turned to her colleague. "She's bluffing. She has to be." 2. But the murmurs rising around them said otherwise. Guests were whispering, shifting, angling their cameras to capture the woman in denim whose every word sounded less like a plea and more like an order. The CEO ended the call with a single tap. Her silence returned. But it wasn't the silence of submission. It was the silence of inevitability. And for the first time, the receptionist's confidence cracked. The lobby had grown dense with silence, the kind that presses against your chest. Guests leaned forward in their seats. Phones hovered higher, and even the guard's hand slipped away from his radio. The CEO lifted her gaze fully now, no longer content to study the marble or the ceiling light. Her eyes locked on the receptionist, steady and unblinking. "You just committed theft," she said evenly. "And worse, you did it to the wrong person." The receptionist scoffed, though her voice cracked around the edges. "Wrong person? You're nothing but a fraud." Setting, the CEO took a single step forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I own this hotel." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward in widening circles until the entire lobby held its breath. Phones caught the moment. Gasps broke like glass. The mother by the elevator clutched her daughter's arm. Elena exhaled sharply, her whisper carrying through the silence. "I knew it." "Tor." The receptionist laughed, brittle and hollow. "Owner? That's a lie. You walk in here dressed like that and expect us to believe." "Check your system," the CEO cut in, voice sharp enough to slice the sentence in half. "Reservation Carter, penthouse suite. Marked owner-level clearance." All eyes turned to Elena. Her face paled, but she nodded once, firm. "It's true. I saw it this morning." The lobby erupted with murmurs. A guest muttered into his live stream, "She owns the place." "The woman they're throwing out owns the place." Comments flooded in, digital voices stacking on top of the human ones already buzzing in the air. The receptionist's smirk collapsed, leaving only raw panic. Her colleague froze, eyes darting to the safe drawer like it had just become a coffin for their careers. The guard stepped back, his posture no longer firm but apologetic. "Mom," he began, but the CEO didn't look at him. She kept her focus on the receptionist, each word measured, deliberate. "You looked at me and saw a fraud. You looked at me and saw someone you could erase. What you didn't see was the deed with my signature on it. What you didn't see was the empire I built from nothing. What you didn't see was the owner." The phones captured every word. Guests whispered, some with awe, some with shame. One man by the lounge muttered, "She never even raised her voice. That's real power." "One." The receptionist shook her head wildly, denial tumbling from her lips. "No, this can't be. She's bluffing." But the silence that followed betrayed her. Because no one in that lobby, not Elena, not the guard, not the guests now live streaming to thousands, believed her anymore. The tide had shifted, authority had reversed, and the woman in denim, quiet and steady, now stood revealed for who she truly was. The owner, the CEO, the power they had just tried to erase. The air in the Horizon Grand lobby changed in an instant. It was no longer heavy with accusation, it was thick with disbelief. Shock rippled outward like a wave crashing against marble walls. The receptionist who had hurled the first insult staggered back a step. Her arms, once folded with defiance, now dangled useless at her sides. The smirk she'd worn like armor crumbled into ash. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Beside her, the second receptionist's face drained of color. She glanced at the safe drawer as if wishing she could reverse time, undo the theft, erase the humiliation. But the red recording lights staring her down said otherwise. Every guest knew. Every phone captured. There was no undoing. The guard's posture shifted too. Authority evaporated from his frame, replaced by something almost pleading. He lowered his eyes, voice soft. "Ma, I didn't know." But ignorance was no shield. Not now. The crowd of guests surged with energy. A woman in a red scarf clapped once, sharp and deliberate, sparking others to join. Applause spread, awkward at first, then swelling into a chorus. Phones tilted higher, catching not just the woman in denim, but the chaos unraveling behind the desk. "She owns it," a man announced to his live stream, his voice trembling with awe. "They tried to throw out the owner." His screen lit up with comments. "Unbelievable. Justice. I'm saving this." Viral. Elena, the young concierge, took a step closer, her shoulders squaring as courage replaced hesitation. "She's telling the truth," she said, louder now. "Her reservation is in the system." I saw it with my own eyes. And you, she pointed at the lead receptionist. You ignored it. Gasps cut through the room. The mother by the elevator hugged her daughter tighter. The teenager whispered, "This is insane." The receptionist's lips quivered. It was a mistake. We'll lie. The CEO's gaze locked on her, unflinching. No, it was a choice. The words landed harder than any shout. Guests murmured agreement, voices rising like a tide. One man by the lounge muttered into his camera, "This is history." She turned silence into power. The lead receptionist backed against the counter, her eyes darting between the CEO and the crowd. For the first time, she looked small, diminished by her own arrogance, cornered not by security but by truth. Her colleague whispered frantically, "What do we do?" But there was nothing left to do. The narrative had shifted, the cameras had spoken, the lobby had chosen its side. And in the center of it all, the CEO stood steady, her presence anchoring the storm. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't needed to. The collapse was happening without her lifting a finger. The empire she built wasn't just bricks and marble, it was dignity. And in this moment, it was dignity that dismantled them. The applause in the lobby faded into a tense silence, every eye locked on the woman in denim. For a heartbeat, she let the stillness breathe, heavy and expectant. Then, with a calmness sharper than any gavel, she spoke into her phone again. "Nia, execute removals. Effective immediately." The line crackled. Then a steady voice replied, "Confirmed." "Which staff?" The CEO's gaze never left the reception desk. "Terminate Gregory Vance, Lauren Hayes, and every employee complicit in this incident. Freeze their access. Effective now." The words were precise, surgical, and the effect was instant. Behind the counter, the receptionist's computer blinked. A red error box filled the screen. Access denied. Her colleague's monitor followed, icons disappearing one by one. Panic spread across their faces as they typed frantically, but every command returned the same response. The guard's radio buzzed, then silenced itself. His credentials were gone too. He pulled the badge from his belt, staring at it as though it had betrayed him. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phones zoomed closer. One guest whispered, "She just fired them. Live." Elena's eyes widened, then steadied. She straightened her shoulders, stepping forward to stand beside the CEO. The receptionist shook her head wildly, voice cracking. "You can't do this. You can't just—" But the CEO cut her off, her tone low and final. "This lobby doesn't belong to you. It doesn't even belong to your manager. It belongs to me, and I will not allow it to be poisoned." Her words struck like iron. The guests murmured, many nodding, their faces reflecting both awe and satisfaction. The second receptionist clutched her badge, her voice trembling. "Please, we didn't know." The CEO's eyes narrowed. "You didn't want to know. You saw me, judged me, erased me. That wasn't ignorance. That was choice." The guard stepped forward, shoulders slumped. "Ma'am, I thought I was protecting the hotel." She met his eyes. "Then protect it now by walking out." His face reddened. Slowly, with every phone in the room recording, he unpinned his badge and set it on the counter. The crowd buzzed. Some applauded. Others whispered, "Unbelievable." The CEO turned back to her phone. "Nia, mark this incident for legal audit. Retain all footage. Notify corporate of immediate staffing vacancies." "Logged and confirmed," the voice replied. The lead receptionist collapsed into the chair behind her, pale and trembling. Her authority had evaporated, stripped not by shouting, but by truth. The CEO stood tall, her denim jacket catching the light of the chandelier above. She hadn't raised her voice once, yet she had dismantled an entire system in minutes. And the lobby, once hostile, now pulsed with something new vindication. The badges lay scattered on the counter like fallen crowns. The computers blinked red, silent, and useless. And the once arrogant voices behind the desk were gone, replaced by shallow breaths and pale faces. The lobby itself seemed transformed. Where tension had once coiled tight, now a heavy quiet lingered, not oppressive, but reverent. Every guest knew they had just witnessed something that would outlive this night. The CEO turned slowly, her eyes sweeping across the room. She didn't need the phones to capture her. She was capturing them. Her presence filled the marble space, steady as stone, commanding as truth. She spoke, her voice low but carrying to every corner. You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake. A ripple surged through the crowd, gasps, nods, a swell of quiet awe. The mother by the elevator squeezed her daughter's hand. The young traveler with the backpack whispered into his phone, "This is what real power looks like." Bell. The CEO's gaze lingered on the reception desk, then shifted to the staff who remained Elena among them, standing tall, her chin lifted with pride. To those who stood by and did nothing, the CEO continued, "Remember this moment. Injustice thrives on silence, but so does justice. The difference is who chooses to speak." Her words cut through the air like a blade, sharp but steady. She reached into the drawer, retrieving her black card. The receptionist didn't dare stop her. Holding it between her fingers, she let it gleam under the chandelier before slipping it calmly back into her pocket. Then she turned back to the stunned employees, her tone final. "I don't need a recording to prove what happened here. I am the result of every recording like it. I am the proof, and tonight, so are you." The applause started small, Elena clapping once, firm and proud. Then the woman in the red scarf joined, then the man in the navy suit. Soon, the entire lobby erupted, applause echoing off marble and glass until it felt like the building itself was testifying. The CEO didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply nodded once, anchoring the moment. Then, without a word, she turned and walked toward the elevator, her denim jacket swaying with each step. Guests parted for her, creating a path. Phones stayed raised, not out of spectacle anymore, but respect. The elevator doors slid open, reflecting her figure in polished steel. She stepped inside, pressed the button for the top floor, the penthouse that was hers by right, and as the doors closed, the applause still thundered. Justice had been delivered. Not by shouting, not by rage, but by dignity and truth, revealed in silence, until silence could no longer be ignored.